Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Ann Reardon, and in this episode we are going to be reviewing two different kitchen gadgets. I have here the Thermomix TM6 and the TOKIT omnicook. Now both of these claim to do the job of 20 kitchen gadgets all in one, which is pretty impressive, but that comes at a price. The TOKIT omnicook will cost you 1,320 Australian dollars. I didn't actually pay for this one. The brand sent me this for free. Thank you for that. This one is going to set you back $2,359, so it's $1,000 more expensive. So do they work, and is the TOKIT omnicook as good as the $1,000 more expensive TM6? I have done extensive testing, so much testing over the last few weeks, and I'm going to summarize all of that here for you to save you the trouble and the money so that you can find out which one you think is better for yourself. So let's start with the appearance. Which one looks better? Well, that's really personal preference, so I can't weigh in for you there. I think they both look good. The TOKIT has a vertical display screen to one side. It has a 2.2 litre jug with a blade at the bottom, and I like the way the jug has the measurements labelled on the side. This is the Thermomix. It has the exact same sized screen, but it's horizontal at the base instead of vertical. And just like the TOKIT, it has a 2.2 litre maximum fill line, but the overall size of this jug is a little bit smaller than the TOKIT one because there's not as much spare room at the top. As far as bench space goes, this one is quite a bit deeper and this one is a bit wider. So it depends, do you want to be able to push it further back on your bench and have room in front of it, or have more room to the side? If I overlay them on top of each other, it is probably a little bit easier for you to see how much room each one is going to take on your counter. There are three different ways that you can use these gadgets, and the first one that I'm going to show you is called guided recipes. And this is one of the things that makes this machine so unique to every other kitchen appliance. The TOKIT has thousands of recipes from all over the world, and they are free to use. You can browse and search them on the machine, or you can do it on your computer, whichever you prefer. The Thermomix has 70,000 recipes, and they allow you to add your own recipes too, which is a feature I really like. But the downside is, to access their recipes and to access the recipes that you've typed in yourself, you have to pay a yearly membership, which I think seems a little bit rich given the purchase price of the machine. But to demonstrate how the guided recipes work, I thought I'd make meringues because they only have 2 ingredients and I've got a lot of testing to do. So on the TOKIT and the Thermomix, you can search and then select a recipe, and then you can scroll down and see all the ingredients and instructions before you start. And then if you decide that's what you want to make, you hit start. The TOKIT will then take you through step by step with photos. Some of the recipes even have videos for each step as well, and you just swipe across to get to the next step. And when you get to adding the ingredients, the mixing bowl will weigh it for you as you add it. How cool is that? This recipe just uses icing sugar and egg whites, and then it tells you to add the whisk in, so just put that in the bowl. Then you whip it. The speed, temperature and time is all already pre-programmed for guided recipes, so you just need to press the control button to start. And once the time is done, you end up with this lovely thick meringue. Look at that, it's not moving at all. It's nice and stiff, so you can pipe that into any shape that you want. It's a very similar process on the Thermomix, but you can't swipe, you have to press next, and it doesn't seem to have photos for the steps. The weighing of ingredients as you add them to the bowl works in exactly the same way as it did on the TOKIT. Nice, I like that. And this particular recipe, instead of using icing sugar, it uses normal sugar and then gets you to blend it to make your own icing sugar. That's not smoke coming out of the top, don't worry, it's powdered sugar. Then it says to tip that into a separate bowl and then wash and dry the bowl. It then has a video showing you how to add the whisk. Then you add the egg whites and whip them on their own, and then add the sugar back in 1 teaspoon at a time. This is a really strange thing to do. You could have just left the sugar in there, added the egg whites and whipped it all together. In olden days recipes, they used to whip the egg whites by hand. So they would whip them separately and then add in the sugar and whip that. And that's because if you put the sugar and egg whites in together, it takes a couple of minutes longer if you're whipping by hand to get it to those stiff peaks. But if you've got a machine like this that can whip really fast, it's just a few seconds longer and you're not whipping by hand, so you're not even going to notice. So you might as well just chuck the sugar and the egg whites in together, because by adding it teaspoon by teaspoon, you've effectively slowed down the recipe, which the purpose of adding it separately was to speed up the recipe. But anyway, you end up with the same beautiful, nice, thick mixture that pipes perfectly into beautiful shapes. And once they're baked, they're indistinguishable from each other. So both recipes give you a great end result. One just took you the long way round to get there. The guided recipes really is a great idea, especially for inexperienced cooks. If you're someone who is trying to eat less takeout, but you don't know how to make your own meals, this sort of thing will make it easy because they step you through every step of the process, literally. The instructions are right there and it shows you how to do it. It's very hard to stuff it up unless you deliberately go off track. So it's a great place for that. The other thing that you can do, of course, is get a recipe book. There are heaps of websites with Thermomix recipes and cookbooks as well, and most of those you can translate directly into the same settings on this TOKIT OmniCook as well. Whichever one you get, there's plenty of independent recipes out there for you to choose. The other thing you can choose instead of guided recipes is to use one of the modes that they have. They both have a whole range of modes, and some of them are the same, like scales, pre-clean, kneading, sous vide, yogurt or fermentation, and turbo. And then there are modes that are unique to each machine. These are all of their other modes. And just because one machine doesn't have a particular function doesn't mean that you can't do that function on that machine. You're just going to have to do it using guided recipes or do it manually. So for example, the Thermomix has an egg boiler mode and the TOKIT does not. But if we use the egg boiler mode on the Thermomix, we just put eggs in straight from the fridge with a litre of water, and then we turn it to how we want it done, and it says it'll be ready in 10 minutes. So then if we go to the TOKIT and we put a litre of water in, eggs straight from the fridge, and we set it to 10 minutes, the only problem is that we can't set it to not stirring. In manual mode, it always stirs. I'm a little worried that even on the lowest speed, these eggs are going to break when they're bobbing around in there. But in the end, they didn't break and they turned out fine. This is the one from the Thermomix, and this is the one from the TOKIT. Similarly, the TOKIT has an ice shaving mode and the Thermomix does not, but you can shave ice in both machines. I used the TOKIT to turn ice cubes into this finely crushed ice, which is perfect for drinks, and I did the same in the Thermomix manually without a problem. The ice in this second glass is from the Thermomix. So by now you've probably noticed there is a third way you can use the machines, and that is manually setting everything yourself. And you would think that in that they would be identical, but they actually differ quite a bit here. So let's start by looking at the time setting. On the TOKIT in manual mode, you can set it to go for up to 99 minutes, and that is the same on the Thermomix. Both machines can run for a lot longer than that in some of the pre-programmed modes, but they won't let you choose that in the manual mode. Now, if we look at the temperature, the TOKIT can go up to 180 degrees Celsius, which means you can use it for sugar work, making caramel, browning onions, anything that requires a high temp. The Thermomix only goes up to, well, it has Varoma, which is 100 degrees for steam, but the maximum temperature you can set is 120 Celsius. The machine itself can go higher than that, and it does in some of the guided recipes, but it won't let you manually choose that. Even if you try and type your own recipes in, it won't let you pick anything above 120 degrees. So unless you want to make one of their guided recipes, you're a bit stuck. So for example, in the TOKIT, I put in some sugar, glucose syrup and water to the jug and set it to heat to 155 degrees in manual mode. And I got this perfectly heated sugar. Once it cooled down, it's crack hard and delicious pecan brittle. I'll put all the recipe details on my website for all of these tests I'm doing in case you want to make them too. In the Thermomix, I couldn't do that manually, so I searched for a peanut brittle guided recipe, hoping I could manually modify it. But when I got to the heating screen, it just says max temp. It doesn't tell me what the temperature is, and it won't let me adjust it. I can adjust the time, but I cannot adjust the temp. And then when I turned it on, it stirs for a few seconds and then it stopped and says the cooking process was stopped because the ingredients and quantities differ too much from the original recipe. So in the Thermomix, you can only use the high temperatures needed for sugar work for their recipes in the exact quantities that they have. If you want to make your own recipe or a different quantity, you can't do that. One thing that these machines are very good at, which is why they are in a lot of commercial kitchens, is precise temperature control. When you're making a recipe like cremeux, it has to be heated to an exact temperature so that you've cooked the egg yolks, but you haven't overcooked them, because if you overcook them, they'll go lumpy, a bit like having scrambled eggs mixed with milk. So if you're doing that on a stovetop, you have to first whisk together the egg yolks and the sugar, then heat up your cream, then add some of that cream into the egg yolks to temper it, then add that back into the cream, put it on the stovetop and make sure it doesn't go above 85 degrees so that it doesn't go lumpy. But if you're using one of these, you can just chuck the sugar and the cream and the egg yolks directly in, turn it on to stir, and then set the temperature to 85 degrees and leave it to just come up to the right temperature, which is so simple. You know it's not going to overheat and it's not going to go lumpy, which is great. The only thing you do need to consider is, although you know it won't go over that temperature, in the TOKIT it's not actually telling you what temperature it's currently at. So for recipes like this where it matters and you need to cook the egg yolks up to 85 degrees, you're going to need to use a digital thermometer while you work out a new recipe so that you know how long to leave it in there to get it up to that temperature. The Thermomix, on the other hand, has the temperature that you set it at in the middle, and it tells you above that what the current temperature is. This is saying that we have reached 85 degrees already. I just want to check that because it got there a lot faster than I would have expected. Put in the digital thermometer into the bowl, and we're actually only at 43 degrees, not 85. Wow, that is actually a major concern, because if I hadn't have checked the temperature, I would have thought it was at 85 because it's telling me it is, but at 43 degrees, the eggs are not safe to eat. Let's double check that and just crank that up to 100 degrees. At that temperature, the mixture should split and be lumpy and it will be boiling and bubbling. Fast forward a minute and now it says we've reached 100 degrees centigrade, but the digital thermometer says it's only 61. Let's have a look inside, and that is not bubbling and it is not split and it is definitely not 100 degrees. This is a brand new machine and it is super expensive, so I expected it to be 100% accurate within a degree or two at least. So let's do a worldwide test, see if just this one is faulty. If you have a TM6 and you have a digital thermometer, can you make for me a recipe that needs eggs? Let's make it consistent. Let's choose one. So they must have an ice cream, like a vanilla ice cream recipe. Make that and check when you get to the heating section of the recipe. When it says that it has reached the temperature, can you check with your digital thermometer what temperature it is currently at? And let me know in the comments how it went. I like having the temperature on the screen saying what temperature we're currently at, but if that temperature is completely inaccurate, that is worse than not having the temperature at all. I would rather use a digital thermometer and know for sure what temperature we're at. Okay, so moving on, let's test the other functions. One of the functions they do is blending, chopping, grinding. All of them are fairly similar. You've just got a blade spinning at different speeds. Probably the hardest thing for that to do well is grinding. So let's put it to the test with a hard grain. I'm going to use some freekeh. Freekeh is just a durum wheat that has been harvested while it's still green. It is then roasted and rubbed or polished. So we'll give each machine 100 grams of freekeh and 1 minute to grind it on top speed. Then to compare, I'll sift it through a fine sieve. The TOKIT gave us this much flour and 25 grams of coarse stuff that wouldn't go through the fine sieve. And with the Thermomix, the results were similar. This is the fine flour, but there was a bit more. There was 31 grams of the coarser stuff left, which makes sense because the TOKIT's top speed is 12,000 RPM and the Thermomix is 10,700 RPM. You could, of course, get the same results in the Thermomix. You just need to leave it for a little bit longer than you did in the TOKIT. The next function I want to test is kneading to make different doughs. I've got the same ingredients in each bowl and I'll set them to knead using their pre-programmed mode for 7 minutes. They are both quite noisy and wobble a fair bit when they're in kneading mode. My youngest came in to see what the noise was all about. From beginning to end, the Thermomix had moved a little bit on the bench and the TOKIT had stayed put, so I had a look underneath, and the Thermomix has solid rubber feet. They can move around within the area where they're joined, which gives them a bit of flexibility, but they don't suction to the bench. The TOKIT feet move around as well, giving them that flexibility, but they also have a suction cup on them, so they stick to the bench, which is why it has stayed put. Back to the bread, they both made beautiful dough, which I baked into lovely fluffy rolls. I don't think I'll be needing a bread machine anymore. I always just use it to knead the dough and then I take it out so I can bake it into the form that I want. These both did a great job of kneading and made enough dough to make 2 loaves each. Next, to test how well they steam rice. For each of them you need to add in a basket which came with the machine, and then weigh in your rice. You will then need to rinse that rice under water so that it's wet and add water to the jug, of course. You then turn it onto steam and select your time and start. They both made really nice steamed rice. It was great. They're both equal here. Now let's look at the sous vide function on each machine. Now sous vide is quite a specific way of cooking where you cook at a lower temperature than you normally would over a longer time. Now to make that food safe, you do need to use a vacuum sealer to vacuum pack the food. That just eliminates the oxygen that most bacteria needs. Both machines correctly tell you to make sure you're using a vac sealed bag when you select sous vide. And you also need longer times than you'd normally cook for, so if you're new to sous vide, I'd suggest that you use a guided recipe. Otherwise, you can just use the sous vide mode on each machine and customize it how you like. If you want to do sous vide in these machines, then for both of them you need to purchase their blade cover accessory, and that does what it says. It covers the blade so that the bag can't get pierced. As the blade goes round, the blade has to spin so that it's circulating that water and you're getting an even temperature the whole way through. After the problems we had with temperature with the Cremo, I thought I would double check the temperatures. Now the Thermomix says it is at 60 degrees, and let's have a look. It's been going for a while now, and yep, the water is at 59. That's good, I'm happy with that. So when it's water, it seems to be a bit more accurate. Let's check the TOKIT while we're here. In it goes. Spot on, 60 degrees. That's exactly what we asked for. So both machines are good for sous vide, but obviously you can't fit a large volume of food in there. But let me show you the results. After an hour, you can take the chicken out and sear it just so it's browned on each side, or you can serve it just like this. And it is so tender and so moist and perfectly cooked the whole way through. This is like something you'd get at a restaurant. Next, onto the slow cooking function. I put some water and 800 grams of pork and some spices and some vegetables into the jug of each one. On the TOKIT, if I choose stewing from the pre-programmed modes, the maximum time I can set is 99 minutes, which is a pity because I want longer than that. I can put the temp to what I like, and on this mode it stirs intermittently. I'd really like to be able to set the time for longer in this mode because I want to cook the pork for 6 hours. If I go into sous vide, I can set it for 6 hours at 80 degrees, but then it stirs the whole time. You can get around that in the TOKIT. It has a unique thing which is called a slow cook plug that you can swap out the blade for this plug instead, but that is an added accessory and I don't actually have that. The Thermomix doesn't have one of those at all. Ideally what I'd love is if they would both just let you turn them on without stirring, because I feel like that'd be a better option. If I could stir sometimes and then change the setting manually to not stir, that's what I'd really like. And stirring intermittently as an option in manual mode as well. That would be awesome. Neither of them offer that. You have to have it stirring if you're doing it in manual mode. there's something for them to add. On the Thermomix, under the slow cooking setting, you can select up to 8 hours and adjust the temperature to what you want, and it stirs intermittently. So it's very similar to the stewing mode on the TOKIT, but you can set it for longer. After 6 hours of total cooking time on both machines, you end up with lovely tender pork that is easy to pull into shreds. That'll be great in rolls with some coleslaw. Now we've looked at the highest temperatures they can go to, so what about the lowest temperatures? I would love if they could temper chocolate. And they can't. They can melt chocolate beautifully if you put the chocolate in there and then just turn it on to blitz it up into small pieces. You can then put it onto the lowest temperature and get it to stir until it's melted. If you don't have a large amount of chocolate, you are going to need to scrape it off the blades so that that will melt. This is 180 grams of chocolate in here, so you'd need quite a bit of chocolate if you were going to cover the blades. The lowest temperature you can set it to on the TOKIT is 35 degrees, and the lowest temperature you can set it to on the Thermomix is 37 degrees. So they just don't go low enough in temperature to allow us to play with those temperatures and temper the chocolate, but it does melt it beautifully, which is a start. Now both of them have a yogurt or a fermentation function, which will allow you to have low temps over 8 hours. And after I put this on overnight, by the morning I had some beautiful yogurt in each of them. This is from the TOKIT, just putting that on top of muesli mixed with freshly squeezed orange juice. And this is from the Thermomix. I really can't tell these two apart. They both worked really well for yogurt. In their guided recipes, they both have recipes for ice cream, but they don't have a freezer bowl. So I thought I'd test it out using my roasted strawberry ice cream. You can get my book Spiral Bound on Amazon now. If you prefer Spiral Bound, you can go get one of those. Now, instead of churning the mixture as it freezes like you normally would, they both say to freeze it and then cut it into cubes and then blend it in the machine. Now, while this will make a frozen dessert, it is not going to be the same texture as churned ice cream. You can see that this one looks lighter in colour, and that's because it has a lot more air whipped into it, and because you've churned it as it froze, it has really small ice crystals that you just can't even detect. So the ice cream machine one is smooth and creamy, and the other one, it's a little bit icy. It has a different texture. It's not as airy. But if you don't have an ice cream machine, then it definitely is a yummy frozen dessert, but it's just not quite the same if you're after really smooth ice cream. Now onto steaming. If you want to use them for a large amount of steaming, not just the little steamer basket, then you'll need to purchase the optional extra of the steamer that goes on top. This is the Thermomix one. It has a tray on the top and then one on the bottom. And I found this space on the bottom to be quite small, and that's because it has to be able to go down to the size of the top of the Thermomix. So you can fit about 4 bao buns down the bottom. Put the tray on and add 7 more on top, followed by the lid. This is the TOKIT one. They have a top tray and they have a bottom tray. Now by adding this layer, it takes it from the small circle that fits to the top of the device to a larger area. So now we can fit 7 bao buns at the bottom and another 7 at the top. So depending how many people you have in your family or if you have a party on, the TOKIT one gives you a lot more room. They both steamed really well. Last but not least, let's look at safety and run some tests for that. If we fill them both to the maximum level and then put them on maximum speed for 1 minute, nothing is coming out of the lids, not at all, not even a drop. Now, while neither of these will turn on with the lid not locked into place, you can turn it on without the cup. So I've run this test again with the cup out, and I've circled the drops after a whole minute. To be honest, I thought there'd be a lot more. Obviously, if it is this full and it's hot, don't run it at full speed with the cup out because there are some little splatters as you'd expect. The Thermomix sort of tries to prevent this in manual mode. If you select a temperature over 60 degrees, it won't let you choose a speed higher than 6. It disables heating. However, if you've already made something that you've heated, say, to boiling point, like a soup or something like that, and then you're just asking it to blend it and you're not telling it to heat it up from that point, but it's already hot, it will let you zoom it all the way up to speed 10. So It's a strange safety measure that only works in some circumstances. The Thermomix does also have a splash guard that you can put on top while letting more steam escape. I'm not sure if that's really needed though, as both machines were designed with a vent around the cup. You can see there's a little bit sticking down that stops the cup going all the way down here on the TOKIT, so there's a gap for the steam to escape so pressure doesn't build up inside while you're cooking. The Thermomix cup has a rim around most of the way, but then it has a gap on one side for the steam to escape too. It is important that these don't get locked. Neither machine will function if you don't have the lid locked in place, and that is a safety measure. The TOKIT has a piece here that has to slide in sideways and lock in at the front like that. I did notice that if you push the lid down at the front and then turn it, it is possible to lock it in at the front when it's not properly connected at the back. So you do have to make sure that you put the lid on properly before turning it to lock into place. Thermomix have got around that problem by locking the lid in place on both sides for you when you turn it on, which of course leads to another potential hazard, which it calls the risk of injury from pinching your fingers. I am not willing to sacrifice my fingers to test that one, so instead let's use a carrot shaped like my little finger. Ouch, that would hurt so much. Well, there is a very in-depth, comprehensive comparison for you. Let me know which one you think is better bang for your buck. With thanks to my patrons for your ongoing support, here is a list of absolute legends. And if you liked this video, as always, like, comment, share, subscribe, and watch more episodes. Make it a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.